Hey there, my dear storytellers. This is Mary Rose Wood. It's Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. It is November. This is the first live stream of November. And in honor of that, we're going to talk about NaNoWriMo, but not just about NaNoWriMo. I'm going to offer some tips. 10. We'll call them my top 10 tips about how to make the most of this annual writing sprint, which I know a lot of you out there are participating in. And I'm a fan. I'm all for it. I'm in favor of anything that gets writers writing, gets our creative juices flowing, gets us excited about working on a project, makes us feel part of a community. These are all great things. However, November is just 1 month of the year. So every tip that I'm going to give you for thriving and rocking your NaNoWriMo, I hope will also be something that you can use as you go through the year and improve, just kind of level up through the year your writing practice. Okay. And I want to bring on a comment already. Anne has already learned something really important. Finally, she says, I know what the name NaNoWriMo means. I know it sounds like something out of a Mother Goose rhyme, but it's National Novel Writing Month, and November is it. Now, for some of us, every month is National Novel Writing Month. Am I right? Let's say hello to the folks who are here live. Erin, it's great to see you here. Anne, thanks so much for leaving a comment. I love it. I'm Mary Rose Wood. If you're new to the live stream, I'm an author myself. This is a live event that we do every week. And I love going live because we can have a conversation. If you've got stuff to share about the topic of the week, share it. If you've got questions, things that you'd like for us to weave into the conversation, post them. If you've got suggestions or ways to help your fellow storytellers, share it. Let's make this a participatory event. Keeps us engaged and we all get something out of it. I want to start before we get to our first tip about how to make the most of NaNoWriMo. Let's all congratulate Jaron, who has announced a new project. I wrote his first paragraph yesterday. Congratulations, Jaron. Now, Jaron has just actually provided living proof of some of the tips that I'm actually going to share today. So that's a great way to get started. Listen, if you're doing NaNoWriMo and you're here live, post it in the comments. Be like Jaron, make a little fuss about yourself. We all are here to support you. Okay. And I'm here to support you too. And how I'm going to do that is with 10 tips. Who doesn't love a good 10 tips list? Am I right? All right. First of all, my first tip about how to rock NaNoWriMo this year, every year, and even maybe when it's not November, is to use this time to make a habit of writing. Now, we talk sometimes on this YouTube channel about process, about the mindset of the working writer. That's one of our go-to themes. We talk about story structure a lot. We talk about writing craft a lot, but we also talk about mindset. And we've done live streams about discipline and why it's a kind of a problematic idea because, discipline is sort of like white knuckling your way to make yourself do something you don't really want to do. But that's not how to have a life as a writer. We love writing. We love books. We want to go to this with enthusiasm. So we put discipline aside and we try to replace it with the idea of habit, of the things that we do kind of effortlessly. They're so woven into our daily routines that we do them without having to force ourselves. They are our habits. Now, the key to making a habit, as I'm sure many of you have learned, is repetition. Something doesn't become a habit through force of will. We actually have to repeat stuff a lot. And as we repeat it, our brains get rewired and the thing becomes a habit. It becomes not only woven into our day, but woven into us. Isn't that a cool idea? So when you commit to something like NaNoWriMo, where you've set yourself a goal to finish a certain amount of words by the end of a month, and so you've done the math, you've broken it down, you're going to do X amount of words a day, you're going to sit down every day, and you're really going to execute this. What you're doing is you're creating repetition. And so that by the end of the month, what felt like a sprint, kind of a special occasion may in fact start to feel like a habit. I want you to cultivate this mindset during NaNoWriMo. I want you to be thinking about this not as some kind of one-off, a special month that you're going to do weird things that you don't typically do. It's about habit formation. Take advantage of that. How can you take advantage of that? Repeat what you do every day. Don't try to make it different every day. Try to make it routine. If you're going to write at a certain time, write at a certain time. If you're going to write in a certain place, write in a certain place. If you're going to wear your lucky writing scarf or your lucky writing hat or your lucky writing socks, like put them on. Make a routine out of it that repeats so that by the time you get to the end of the month, you will not only have achieved your goal of getting to the end of the month, but you actually started to let your brain rewire a bit. Now, is 30 days enough to form a new habit? I don't think it is, like, technically in terms of neuroscience, but it's a lot of the way there. So you might want to also consider 40 days or 50 days or 60 days of doing it the same way, so that it really starts to be not just like a theoretical habit, but a neural habit. This is really life-changing stuff. Start to hack your brain a little bit. So first tip is to make a habit of writing. And now let me add the piece of this that is really going to make a difference long-term, even when November's over. When you create a new habit of doing something, and it's like part of your neural network now that this is what I do, it's not discipline anymore. Now it's habit, but then it sort of leaps over yet another fence and it becomes identity. And this to me is the gold, that we want to get to the point where writing is not just a thing that we do, but it's really part of our identity. It's who we are, because we know that the things that we identify with, we don't really have to struggle to do. If I'm a person that likes to watch The Crown, I'm just choosing something silly, but I don't have to force myself to watch The Crown. I don't have to like make a date. Like, oh, I got to reward myself. Like, I can't wait to watch The Crown when it comes back. And you know when it's coming back? In November. It's a little bit on my mind right now. But you see what I'm saying? It's like it becomes part of who you are. You don't need the effort. You don't even really, at a certain point, need the lucky writing socks, if you will. If it's who you are, you can just do it. You can deliver those goods anytime. It's that deeply embedded in you. All right. So that's my first tip. Already kind of a juicy one, right? Make a habit of writing by repetition. Allow that repetition to turn into habit, and then challenge yourself to let that habit turn into an identity for yourself. Tip number 1. Tip number 2, and we're doing it right now. Tip number 2 is something that we are all doing right this second, which is so wonderful. Surf the energy of a group. Isn't this fantastic? The energy that we bring to our passions is phenomenal. When we're passionate about something and we come at it wholeheartedly and we bring our energy to it and we set goals, I mean, it's exciting. But when we're part of a whole stadium full of people who share our passion, who are rooting for the same thing we're rooting for, who are cheering for our team, right, so to speak, that energy is incredible. And one of the things that makes NaNoWriMo a thing that has legs, that's, kind of captured people's imaginations, is that it is so rewarding to be part of a group who are all committed to the same thing. So what I want you to do is maximize the opportunity during November to get all of that crowdsourced energy as you can and make it your own. So what does that mean? Use all the NaNoWriMo groups around you. Maybe there's one in your community. Maybe you belong to one online. Fantastic. Share your progress. Post your wins. Meet up with other writers for like writing sprint dates, whether it's on Zoom or at the local coffee shop. Like, let the crowd carry you. Put on your NaNoWriMo t-shirt. You don't have one? I don't even know if they have them, but make one. Like identify yourself as part of this group effort and let the group feed you. It's really going to lift you up. It's really going to lift you up. And it's going to lift you up as you lift others up. because then you're part of the crowd, right? You're part of the group. So that's a cool thing to think about. Now, how do we surf the energy of the group, when the game is over, so to speak, when the stadium is emptied out and we're all back in our own homes? There are many ways to do this, storytellers. Surf the energy of a group year round by finding your writing community. Find your writing people. Whether you're part of a program in a community like Path of the Storyteller, which is the program that I founded and lead, where I teach and mentor writers, that's a great community. The people who are part of that community know how precious it is and how much we all care about each other and each other's writing. It's just amazing. You can find a group online. You can find a group where you live. Maybe you went to a conference and you exchanged phone numbers or email addresses with the people you met at the conference, and you want to continue to have Zoom dates. You can find a way to be part of a writing community year round, and I highly recommend you do it. And this is different than critique groups, although a critique group can be like a valuable part of writing community. I'm really talking about community. I'm talking about people who are in the game with you and who are basically colleagues, there to cheer you on just as you are there to cheer them on. You might have practical ways to help each other as well, and that's awesome. But being part of a community is very helpful. It's also very helpful with tip number 1, which is cultivating an identity as a writer. So tip number 2 is to surf the energy of the group, not just in November, but all year round. Now, tip number 3, some of you are going to be like, is she talking to me? I get that sometimes from you guys. You send me little emails. Was that about me? Was that tip about me? Was today's live stream about me? I love it when I hear that, because the answer is never yes. It's never no, because hopefully this is to some extent about all of you. Tip number 3 is don't overthink. Don't overthink. Now, those of you who study with me know what a sort of stickler I am for story structure and writing craft. So maybe you're like, all we do is overthink. We're so meticulous about, studying all this stuff and trying to implement it in our work. But here's the truth of the matter. Creative energy is fundamentally the energy of play, of children at play. You know children at play. You've been a child at play. You've seen children at play. They don't overthink the game. They play it. They don't stop in the middle and doubt themselves and say, I wonder if this is a good use of my time. I wonder if I'll ever get paid for playing this game. I wonder if I'm good at this game. Here we are pretending we're playing dress up. We're putting furniture in the dollhouse and pretending, who lives there. I wonder if this is the right dollhouse that we should be playing with. Like, they don't do that, right? They don't do it. So what I want you to cultivate in the month of November is that spirit of play and that spirit of not overthinking. And here's why. It's because NaNoWriMo is a sprint. It's all about speed, right? It's just about speed. It's about getting X amount of words done every day. And so when you have to work fast, you have to improvise. It takes away the opportunity to overthink. It's going to put some guardrails. If you are a writer who has a tendency to overthink and second guess yourself and get stuck and slow down and just and make a labor out of creative play, then allow the speed, the sort of rollicking pell-mell spirit of doing this sprint get you to lighten up and just improvise and just make stuff up. All right. This is really important because sometimes we can really allow our desire to get it right, especially if we're kind of wired this way, which many of us are. If we're wired a little bit toward perfectionism, or if we were, educated or raised in a certain way where making mistakes was not embraced as the necessary part of growth that it is, in fact. If we hate to make mistakes, if we hate to be wrong, if we think we're supposed to get it right, if we're like that, then we need to spend a little extra attention on reactivating our sense of play, Not overthinking, not overthinking at all. All right. So use the speed, use the daily deadline to drop all your judgment, drop your self evaluation. If you've got a little plan for the day, if you've looked at November and you've made a little plan for how you're going to get through a whole book in November, maybe you took advantage of the writing prompts that I was sharing in the month of October to help people prepare. I'm going to put that banner up again because it is certainly available. It too is something that's not just useful during November. This is a collection of 30 writing prompts that are based on story structure. So if you complete them all from beginning to end, you will have been coaxed into brainstorming the essential material for an entire story. So I strongly recommend it. It's at www.pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. If you don't have it already, just get over there and help yourself to it, right? That's a free download from me to you. So if you've got something like that, maybe you have a little writing prompt for each of the 30 days, and that's fine, but don't stare at it for an hour. Just do it. Really treat it as an improv, okay? Do first, think later. All right, that was my third tip. Don't overthink. Number 4, we have already seen a terrific example of number 4, which is celebrate your wins. Now, we started our live stream today with Jaron, with an exclamation point saying he wrote his first paragraph yesterday. Listen, that's a win. He wrote his first paragraph yesterday. I bet a lot of people wrote their first paragraphs yesterday, and I hope they're all celebrating with exclamation points like Jaron is in a writing community, the way Jaron is. We're all cheering him on, and I'm cheering all of you on. And so what I want you to do is to just remember that you can celebrate your wins. And if you are defining your wins too strictly, you may feel like, well, my win for NaNoWriMo is if I complete an entire draft of a novel by the end of November. That's going to be my win. It's like, that is such a big win. It will be huge if you do that. But what's your win this morning? Could we just zero in a little bit? You wrote your first paragraph is a huge win. All right. So here's my rule about celebrating wins. Everything is a win. Okay. Everything is a win. You're here right now watching this live stream. Maybe you're watching the replay. You're thinking about how to have a good NaNoWriMo. That's a win. Look, you spent a little time part of a writing community, getting some mentor energy. Maybe you're going to feel encouraged by the time we're done. I really hope so. Celebrate the win. You did that. Maybe you made yourself an extra good writing snack today. You really made a good writing snack, and you know that it's there for you when you finish your daily paragraph or whatever it is you're planning to do today. That's a win. I'm just going to go out and say that everything is a win. And everything is a win in the month of November if you're doing NaNoWriMo. Everything. Okay? That's the attitude we want to take. Now, I bet some of you are laughing, and that's good. And we might say, well, okay, for a month, I can commit to thinking of literally everything as a win. But what if you tried to do that all year long? What if, storytellers? What if? What if every time you sat down to work, it was a win? What if every time you wrote a sentence, it was a win? Right? What if every time you showed up at your writing date, or you showed up for your community, or you encouraged another writer, that was a win too, right? Make everything a win. It's good advice. All right. And I guess the other side of that penny is if you're making everything a win, please stop beating yourself up about anything, because it really doesn't help. I've yet to hear a writer tell me that, you know what? I am so full of self-doubt and self-judgment, and it really motivates me. Nobody says that. It's just not going to help, So let's just drop that whole approach, which is all too common, and just make everything a win. If you're someplace where you can speak out loud, I want you to say it. I can't hear you, so I'm going to just take this on faith. Everything is a win. All right. I do want you to cultivate that attitude year round. Is there a reason not to? There is not. Okay. That was tip number 4. Tip number 5 of my 10 tips about how to rock NaNoWriMo, not just in November, but, every month. Tip number 5 is this: have a drafting mindset. Set your mindset to drafting. Remember what drafting is. You know how they say about, the notorious kind of mood depressing effects of too much social media. There's this really great advice that I'm sure you've all heard, which is, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides, right? When you see people posting on social media and it looks like they've got perfect lives and, it's a curated feed, right? So don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. That way lies nothing good. Similarly, part of having a drafting mindset is don't compare your drafting to other people's finished books. And I cannot say this often enough, but finished books and drafts don't look anything alike. The drafting is what you do in order to get someday, after a fair amount of effort, to the finished book. But the drafting, in a sense, bears the same resemblance to the finished book as the orchestra rehearsal bears to the concert at Carnegie Hall. And the orchestra rehearsal is what? It's full of stops and starts. Let's take that piece again. Violins, you got to stop and tune up. I just want to hear, the cellos right now. Oh, there's a typo in the manuscript. Everyone take out your pencils and fix it. It's a work session. It's a work session. You might, if you've ever been in any kind of musical ensemble, you know what I'm talking about. It's the same is true for anything that involves that kind of practice and application of technique in the pursuit of mastery. So if you've taken lessons in some kind of sport or painting or anything, there's this quality of preparation, of study and rehearsal and repetition and practice that happens. And then there's like the public performance, and that happens last, right? And then it's done. And then we go back and we start preparing for the next one. Writing is exactly like that. It's not just a little bit like that. It's exactly like that. And your drafting is like the rehearsal, where people are starting and stopping and running the tricky bits again and trying to figure out, like, is it loud or is it soft? Should I go fast or should I go slow? Like, it's just exploratory. It's full of questions. It's full of do-overs. It's just the preparation. Here's the thing. When the book is finished, and it actually has that sense of inevitability, right, that a finished work has, your work is done. You don't get to live with that book. I mean, you get to hopefully have it published in some way, or publish it so that it becomes part of your readers' lives. And then there's a copy of it on your bookshelf. But the time to engage with that book is now over. You're starting the next one. So our feeling that the book that we're working on should be a finished book or should feel or resemble a finished book is just a misconception. If it were finished, you wouldn't be working on it anymore. All right. Right now, it's just like a heap of scraps in the basket that you're making a quilt out of. It's a room full of yarn that you're knitting a sweater out of. It's material. It's messy, and it doesn't look like a finished object yet. That's what I mean by a drafting mindset. So what does your draft look like? I'm using metaphors like yarn and orchestra rehearsals and stuff, but writers are always saying, well, what does that look like in terms of a writer's craft? Maybe your draft is run-on sentences. Maybe it looks like grocery lists. Maybe it's just really, really on the nose, cliche-ridden, narrative that you're just putting out there with your eyes half closed, not even really thinking about it. It's fine. It's fine. All that stuff is fine. Drafting can look like whatever you need it to look like. It doesn't matter. It's going to be fixed later. You're just drafting. Okay. Now, is that an attitude that you can carry over all year round? Yes. Yes, it is. And I think that some of you may find it easier to be in a drafting mindset during a special container like NaNoWriMo when you know that we're playing a game. We're just playing a game here. We're trying to write a draft in a month. Everybody knows it's kind of impossible. So as long as we get it down, we played the game. It's a mess. It's the worst novel ever. It's just a draft of me being silly and writing, whatever I thought of next, right? So maybe it's a little easier during a container like that, this playful sprint, to have a drafting mindset. But I am here to encourage you to cultivate that mindset all year long, because that's what drafting is. Okay? Deal? Pinky swear? All right. That was number 5. Number 6. Take revision notes as you go, but there is no need to revise just yet. So this is part of this drafting mindset, right? Because a lot of times we're drafting and we think, oh, that doesn't work. That's no good. Or we think, oh, I think I could use that later. That gives me an idea for something that might happen much later in the book, right? Or we might start writing a scene in which this character, we were thinking this character was going to, fall in love with that character. But halfway through drafting the scene in this kind of playful, sprinting state, we start to just kind of improvise that the character starts falling in love with the other character. And then we're like, I wasn't planning for that to happen. Now what to do? This is all fantastic. All of these sort of little like unexpected things and misfires and things that you notice is all fantastic, as long as you don't let them stop you. What I suggest is that you take revision notes as you go. But there's no need to stop and revise just yet, unless you really feel that that's going to help you. If it's some kind of big course correction, maybe you want to make a few tweaks. But here's another suggestion. You can make the course correction in your revision notes. You don't have to go back and rewrite the 20 pages you just scribbled. Chances are you're going to rewrite those 20 pages many more times. So maybe right now is not the time, because if you rewrite them now, you're going to learn more stuff and you're just going to want to rewrite them again later. So instead, like, keep your revision notes separate somehow. Maybe there's another document. Maybe you use a writing tool that allows you to keep notes on the side. Maybe you just are super old school and simple-minded like me, and you just use the Microsoft Word comment feature to make comments in the margin of your own draft. I might write something and say, oh, interesting, that's an idea. I could write a whole scene based on what just happened in this draft. I'm not going to stop and write the scene now, but I'm just going to put it like note to self. It's kind of like a way of putting Post-it notes all over everything. Some of you might like Post-it notes. I got nothing against that. Do it. Use your Post-it notes. Do what works for you. But here's the crux of this tip, which is to take the revision notes as you go. If you have ideas, don't drop them because it's not time to execute them, or you're afraid you're going to lose your momentum. Just scribble a note to self that you're going to do that later. You're going to come back to it later. And if you decide partway through drafting, oh, this is going to go in a very different direction than I was planning, you can just go in that direction knowing, because you're going to put it in your notes, that you're going to go back and rewrite everything that came before to point in this direction, because now you've discovered where you really want the story to go. All right? This is normal process. And this kind of thing makes some writers feel very constrained. And if you've ever felt this way, please feel free to share in the comments. It's almost as if they've written 20 or 30 pages and then they get the idea that they've been looking for. And of course, as soon as you get the idea that you've been looking for, you know it. And then it means that the 30 pages you just wrote are not really accurate anymore, because now we're going to take this in a slightly different direction. And then they don't know what to do. They feel like they're at a crossroads. Like, oh, well, now I have this good idea. I think this is really what I meant to be doing all along. It took me writing all these pages to really figure it out. But what do I do? If I go down this path, I'm going to have to throw away everything I've done. You're in the drafting mindset, my friends. Throwing away everything you've done is the fun of it. You're just going to write it again and again. You're going to be in that rehearsal mode until the book is done. So throwing stuff away is part of it. Take it from the top, as we say at band rehearsal. Just take it from the top again. But don't keep going back. and like going around in that circle. Like just put it in your revision notes. I'm going to come back and do this later and carry on as if you've already made those changes. That's the way to keep your momentum going and stay in that drafty kind of mindset. All right. Speaking of drafting, let's go to tip number 7 of my 10 tips on how to get the most out of NaNoWriMo and your writing process all year long. This one is so near and dear to my heart. Tip number 7 is draft story, not words. Now, here's what I mean by that. And I actually did a whole live stream about not getting lost in the words. When you're drafting, you might actually draft some very nice sentences. You might think they're really good. You might say that's one of the best sentences I ever wrote. I really like that one. That one can stand up against the work of some of my favorite writers. You know what? Celebrate the win. That's one of our tips. It's going to be one of our mottos. Celebrate the win. But you're not really here to come up with pretty sentences just yet, are you? You're in a sprint, you're drafting. What you're trying to work out is the story. You're trying to work out the main character's journey of transformation. You're trying to come up with what scenes this book really needs, in what order. You're trying to sort of understand the cause and effect of how we get from what happens in the beginning and what happens in the middle to what happens in the end. You're inventing the cast of secondary characters. You want them all to be essential. You don't want to have like a cast of thousands. You want iconic, well-developed secondary characters who each play an essential role in the hero's journey of transformation. Because if they don't, chances are they're just extras, as we say in the movies, right? We don't need to clutter our story with unnecessary scenes, unnecessary characters, unnecessary digressions. There's a lot to work out about finding that beautiful through line of storytelling that takes us from page 1 to the very last page. That should be your main concern when you're drafting. If the writing is pedestrian, if it's in no way pleasing to you, don't worry about it. That's not necessary. In order to discover the storytelling, you don't need to write good sentences. Now, I've talked about this in other live streams, but if language itself, if playing with words and language is itself kind of inspiring to you, if it's generative to you, if it's like a great improv prompt for you, don't forbid yourself from doing it. Maybe that's just how you roll as a writer. But I'm just here to say that not everybody does. And no matter whether you do or you don't let it become your job. Draft story, not words. All right. If you have a November where you get to the end of it and you've got lots and lots of like pages that look like almost like grocery lists and little summaries of conversations that you haven't even written yet, but you wrote a couple of paragraphs about like, okay, now in brackets, they fight about this and this happens and this happens and this happens. And at the end, she says this and off. Like that's a draft of that scene. In my opinion, that's a draft of that conversation. Yes, it's in brackets and it's just basically a description of what it's going to be. It's like a little treatment or placeholder for the scene that you're going to write, but you got it down so that you can keep going and keep working out the storytelling. We all know that the more time you spend polishing your precious words, the harder it is to throw them away later on when it turns out you don't need them or the story goes in a different direction. So tip number 7 is to draft story, not pages. Tip number 8, also true all year round, but let it also be true in November. If you're writing a little extra, which you may be, I still want you to sleep. I still want you to eat. I want you to move your body, and I want you to spend time outdoors. Any writing career that is built upon negating our basic needs is not sustainable. And I have been a writer for a long time, and I have a lot of friends who've been writers for a long time and who've written lots and lots of books and who live the life of a professional writer. And it always troubles me how often writers that you probably would envy if I told you who I was thinking of, successful writers, are not in particularly good health, are not particularly happy, are grappling all the times with feelings of stress and burnout, and, are just not, even after years of doing it, are not that great at balancing self-care with the intensity of writing as if every month were NaNoWriMo. So you might think you can sprint through this month and say, I'm just going to focus on my writing, then I'll pig out at Thanksgiving, and then I'll get my act back together in December, But I encourage you to never prioritize anything above your health. I encourage you to keep your health always in the number one slot, always in the number one slot. And see if you can do all of the other things while still making sure that your relationship as the chief caretaker of your own humanity, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and psychologically, that your priorities stay in order that way. So that's tip number 8, and that is definitely true all year round, every year of your life. Number 9 resonates with number 8 a little bit. I want you to keep an eye as you go through this November on the pieces of this that you think, oh, I can do this in November, but I can't do this all the time, versus the things that start to feel like, oh, I think I could work this way all the time. So my tip is this: seek what's sustainable. Keep an eye out for what is sustainable. But what do you discover? What's your self-observation about your writing process during this month of like sprinting and surfing the crowd energy and, really focusing on the daily goals and establishing the habit? When you notice something that you think, no, that's really something, that's a keeper. I'm going to keep doing that when this is all done. And I want you to really make note. If you've got a little journal or, your own little personal notebook where you reflect on your development as a writer or your process, then, which I think is often very useful to do. I want you to just keep one little list for what's sustainable. Like, where are the keepers? What did I discover? We all know that a quick win in any endeavor is very motivating, right? And so hitting your daily goal, I got my 1,000 words in today, quick win, celebrate, all the other tips, apply. It gives us that little, rush of brain chemicals that makes us go, yeah, I feel good. But we can't live on quick wins. We can't live on quick wins. We can't make our whole life into playing the slot machine of like, oh, good, I'm going to do it again. Like the sort of addictive quality of the quick win, chasing that. I want you to think about the deeper satisfactions, I guess is what I'm saying. And I want you to recognize that writing is a lifetime practice. This is a sprint in November, and that's fun. It's super fun. It's like a great game that we're all playing, right? But your life is more in common with a marathon, and your writing practice over a lifetime has more in common with a marathon, right? And so you're seeking steadiness, and you want to finish whole and uninjured. So you need to nourish yourself as you go, and you need to discover what motivates you on that deeper level, not just the quick win level. All right. Seek what's sustainable. Number 10 of my top 10 writing tips about how to get the most out of NaNoWriMo and every month of the year, I think is my favorite tip of all. So I thank you for staying around for it. Tip number 10. Pay it forward. If you wrote a paragraph yesterday, then you have more writing experience than someone who's just beginning. And I know we've got a nice crowd gathered in the comments now, and I know a lot of you. And I know how experienced you are as writers and how much you know, whether you realize it or not. And during a month like NaNoWriMo, a lot of folks with a dream to write come out of the woodwork, and they get caught up in the structure, in the game of it, and they think, this time I'm really going to do it. And that to me is one of the greatest things about an event like NaNoWriMo. The energy is contagious and it helps. It's like a little dose of mentor energy. It's my Path of the Storyteller students know exactly what I mean. It's like a little dose of mentor energy that lifts people over their resistance of, well, yeah, I've always thought about maybe writing something, but I just never seem to, get up the courage to actually try it. This kind of crowd energy and public celebration of writing, seeing everybody else doing it, it can really get people started, can really lift them over that little fence. And who's waiting on the other side of that fence? Writers with more experience. And I'm looking at each and every one of you out there, and I'm telling you that you have more experience than another writer who's out there who's just getting started. And I want you to acknowledge that. And I want you to pay it forward. And I want you to look during the month of November for the ways that you can encourage the writers who are new to this, who may be very naive and not know what they're doing and, just got excited to get caught up in it. You can celebrate their wins. You can give them some encouragement, and maybe you can even help answer a question or two when they get stuck. All right. So I really want you to pay it forward. You can think of yourselves as conduits of mentor energy. If you've done a bit of writing, you've got more experience than someone who hasn't. And this is a really good time to flex your mentorship muscles. Okay. My dear storytellers, those are my 10 tips for how to get the most out of November, out of NaNoWriMo. And as you can see, all of them have applications during every month of the year. And I am excited to surf this energy all month long with you. We're going to have live streams every week. And if you've got something that you'd like me to talk about in a November live stream, particularly to help you get through NaNoWriMo, I want to know what it is. So make sure you leave it in the comments below this video. I read them all, and I love it when you suggest a topic. I am going to pivot now to the comments because I see that we have a little bit of questions coming in. Anne's got a nice comment. Anne says, in drafting story not words, she's found it helpful to have a writing mentor. The feedback when she's needed it to get better, identifying when she's doing that. I am glad, Anne, as you could well imagine. I am very glad to know that having a mentor is of benefit to you. And I want to go back to Jaren, who's actually posted a question. Let's answer Jaren's question. What advice would you give to a guest first-year student like me who's taking college classes? So, Jaren, what advice would I give without knowing exactly what the college classes are focused on? I assume that this is like a creative writing class or a fiction writing class. I guess the advice that I would give kind of in a general way to anyone who's seeking training, it's really an interesting question. Whenever we seek training in doing something that we've already been doing on our own, and Jaren, I know that you've written a lot and, are really, really interested in good writing. And then we go and we get training, whether it's at a college class or a program or a conference. One of the things that we have to struggle with in the beginning of our training is that if we try to do what the instructor is telling us to do, we actually have to change the way we write. And our writing feels very personal to most of us. And we think of the way we write as being kind of us. And it's not that that's not true, but it's also true that untrained writers all tend to make the same kinds of gestures in their writing, which is why anyone who's ever taught writers knows that we have to kind of sort through a lot of the kinds of writing habits that are very normal beginner impulses and just kind of get rid of them. We just need to get rid of them. And so you may discover yourself being asked to do things that you say, well, I've been doing that for years. I've written thousands of pages that have that exact thing on them that, use adverbs in that way or, describe things in that way. And it may feel very shocking to be told that you've been doing something that now you're being instructed to stop doing. All right. So my advice, you see, I'm sort of taking Jaren's question and I'm sort of teasing it out a little bit. My advice for anyone who really wants to improve is to just remember that when you start to add like a higher level technique to what you are already doing, it's going to involve a kind of a, like, almost like a shocking of like, oh, but that's how I've always done it. And now you're asking me to change. And you may need to feel trust. You may need to find it within you to just trust that you can try this new way. And that your ear that is very used to the old way may hear the new way and say, but that doesn't sound like me. And you're going to have to get over that, because in a way, we don't want it to sound like you. We want our writing. When I say you, I mean the untrained you who's a beginner. We want your writing to sound like the fully trained, technically proficient, confident writer that you are in the midst of becoming. We want you to sound like the best writer you're capable of being. The best writer you're capable of being after training and practice is going to sound different, right, than the writer who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and writing by ear without a ton of training. All right. So that is my advice for Jaren and for anyone who really wants to sort of seriously level up their writing. Okay. It's a really great question. It's a really great question. All right. And we're going to end with Ellen's very funny and adorable comment. Ellen, I'm so glad you're here. She's rolling with the tips, like take it from the top and keep going. Smiles and laughter put us in our creative brains. Absolutely. That spirit of play is what creativity is all about. Never forget that. Never forget that. But then to make me laugh, and you've totally succeeded, Ellen, please, MRW, make a series of ringtones with these important reminders. It's what we all need, right? Like a little mentor every time we get a notification. Like, don't forget to take it from the top. Stay in drafting mode. Don't forget, it's just play. I absolutely love it. I do love a pithy wise saying, Ellen. So you never know. I could, if I get my technological chops together, I could very much take you up on that suggestion. Listen, storytellers, I am so grateful that you were all here today. I really enjoyed talking about this with you. I don't know how many of you like made a formal or informal commitment to do NaNoWriMo, but listen, we're all writers. We're all going to be writing this month. I hope you're all working on a little something. So up your game, surf the energy of the crowd, stay in that drafting mindset. Don't forget to sleep, eat, move your body, celebrate your wins, do all the things that we talked about today, but mostly have fun. Have fun, support each other, and don't forget my last tip, which is to pay it forward a little bit. In fact, next time we get together, maybe some of you can share what you did to encourage a writer who needed the exact type of mentor energy that you had to offer them and what a difference it made to them. I bet you're going to have some great experiences if you take that to heart. All right, gang, this has been really, really fun. I look forward to seeing you next week as ever. And I'm excited to hear how November goes for you. I think this is going to be a really fun month. Okay. So until the next time I see you, happy storytelling.